I'm Kay Bess, and this is the B-Hive. Women in voiceover, the voices of the fairer sex that keep the wheels of commerce and creativity moving in this country. Voices you hear every day, but names you likely don't know until now. Hey, everybody. Well, it's about time, isn't it? My most sincere apologies for taking so long to get another installment of the B-Hive Women in Voiceover to you. This is sort of an unusual way to start things off again. Well, let me just back up here a second. I attended VO Atlanta, VoiceOver Atlanta, in March of this year, and Gerald Griffith, the creator of that event, decided that he wanted to put together a podcast studio there to invite the many people who do podcasts in voiceover to record there and do their own sort of brand of podcast recording. So he invited me to do so. And interestingly enough, here I do a podcast for women in voiceover, but most of the women there that I knew at the time that I would have had on the podcast have already been on the podcast. So rather than repeat things, I thought that I would throw everybody a curveball and invite two of the most prolific men in voiceover to the podcast. So it's a little unusual, but I'm nonetheless thrilled to bring these two people to you. So my guests for this podcast are Townsend Coleman and Thom Pinto. Both of these men have a very special place in my heart, both very good friends and both very influential to me in my life and career. And so I'm actually quite thrilled to bring them to you here in the B-Hive. And I hope you get something out of it. And we'll be back to our regularly scheduled fabulous females in the B-Hive at the next episode. So until then, please enjoy. This is unedited, by the way. Just want you to know. Just keep that in mind as you listen. Thanks so much. Enjoy. Hey, everybody. Welcome to a very special episode of the B-Hive, Women in Voiceover.
That's us.
Two of these things is not like the other.
Darling.
As you can see, I have two men as my guests today. So,
nice.
So I want to introduce Thom Pinto, who is, well known in these voiceover parts. Thom Pinto happens to be my very first voiceover coach, and also the very first person you made my very first demo.
I did. I was doing demos then, that's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that. And then Townsend Coleman, who is the keynote speaker at VO Atlanta 2018, who is a marvel of all things voiceover, and who is one of my dearest friends, and who I've just been fortunate enough to witness his career. And, it's such a small community in Los Angeles of voiceover people, especially when you kind of grew up in our generation of things.
Right.
And we all were at different agencies, but we all kind of knew of each other, by virtue of how small and who's doing that job, who booked that. So
running
Townsend
into
Coleman,
people at recording studios,
Yeah, exactly.
or the casting houses.
Yeah, exactly. That's where we got to know each other at casting houses and stuff. Yeah. So welcome to the B-Hive.
Thanks.
You're quite honored guests because you're the first men I've ever had on this podcast. So
Look at this.
I know, right?
Here we are.
Did you wear your heels? So I figured that we would just kind of talk about voiceover. Does that make sense?
Well, that's
given
that's
where
what
we
we're
are
here for these last 4 days. Now, this is your first time here.
Yes.
Right. So how have you enjoyed all the buzz? This is like the largest one Gerald Griffith has ever put together. I mean,
I think it's great. I really, I'm very much enjoying it. I'm very much enjoying the whole idea of worlds colliding in voiceover because it is, the voiceover world is distinctly different now than it was when I started in the mid 1980s. It really was Los Angeles, Chicago, New York. There was stuff going on in the, in the Midwest too, in Ohio, Cincinnati, and Chicago and stuff. But you had to go to those cities. I mean, you truly did. So you couldn't really do voiceover if you were living
Do you guys remember ever being, hi, you got to record this job in Chicago, so you got a first class ticket because that was the Screen Actors Guild rule. And they would fly you there and they'd put you up at a hotel.
Well,
then that stopped.
That stopped.
Do they do that now? Don't they? You think we?
Maybe you, not me.
Not.
The last time I do remember that, and I was super thrilled. I don't remember what it was for. I think it was for a healthcare company, and they flew me to San Francisco, and I was super excited because I don't think I'd ever flown first class, and so it was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get paid, and I'm going to get a first class ticket, and then of course I flew. There's no first class on a flight from LA to San Francisco. It was just a plane with seats in it. So it was sort of like rats. I kind of missed out,
That may have been my first time on first class, and then there was a huge gap.
Yeah. Well,
I was never lucky enough to get one of those perks. I didn't have to fly anywhere.
You didn't have to fly anywhere.
You know what's funny? Townsend is like when they were talking about when Jeff was going over your credits, which are obviously very numerous. It's like the funny thing is that I just remember what a great commercial talent.
Yes.
So I'm gonna take her job and ask you a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So obviously, when all the promo stuff started happening for you, and so did the commercial stuff fall off because you just weren't available? Or was it?
It didn't
just
fall
your
off.
Energy?
No, it did not fall off. No, it in fact it increased. And when the promo thing started for me in '93, when I started with NBC in August of '93, I was already doing a lot of animation.
That I knew, yeah.
And the commercial stuff, I had some just terrific accounts. That were long-running accounts. I had Home Depot for like 8 years. I had Jenny Craig for like 7 years, and Mattel Hot Wheels for a long time. Taco Bell.
Jeff helped you to balance that because you were a very, very busy man, and you're one of the few people that were that busy who didn't have a chauffeur.
Right? So true.
Right. Yeah, I kept wanting to borrow Don's limo, but he was always busy using it. I wanted to get Clinton on my payroll. I continued to work heavily commercially. In fact, and I loved it because I had a standing 9:00 session every day at LA Studios for Home Depot, and that got my day started. And I didn't get home until
They're good Danish, of course, always help.
Right?
Yeah, right.
Early morning Danish at LA
Studios.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I didn't get home till 9:30 at night. And I was gone all day, just boom, boom, boom. If I was lucky, I got home at dinner time for dinner, and then I had to cut out again over to NBC for the Tonight Show stuff. And I loved it because I love keeping that busy. And of course, back then it was a novelty. I was making, good bread, and I just loved the work that I was doing because it was all different. I was getting to do animation and TV promo and commercial.
The variety.
And I never got bored. It was always some, new, great, fun, creative challenge.
Human beings, we can't, we've got to be, in order to be motivated, we have to have different facets, different things, because otherwise, you could say I'm going to have steak every night, and after a while, I go, God, I got to have a piece of fish,
right?
Because it's like I'm satiated. Yeah. Well, so that's great that you're able to go to Michelangelo, and you're doing your Home Depot thing, and
loving every minute of it. But it did take its toll, because I was working so much, and finally,
what gave?
What?
I mean, at a certain point,
good question.
I'll tell you. Finally, after about 6 or 7 years, maybe not even that long, maybe about 5 years, by around 98 or 99, I was hitting the end of my rope and running out of steam. Yeah. And by 99, I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown. And I told Jeff, I said, listen, I gotta do something here. I mean, I love working, but I'm just working
Danis.
too much.
Yeah. Jeff Danis, your agent.
Danis, right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And I said, I've got to, something has to give here, and I don't want to give up any work. So what we did was we decided that I wouldn't come into the agency and audition anymore. I didn't need to. It was kind of pointless at that point because I couldn't really take on any more work anyway. And I know it sounds silly.
No,
exactly. Some people don't seem to realize that. I mean, there was a period of time when I was doing more movie trailers, okay? And the way the movie trailer stuff was, you do one, and then they'd say, okay, now you have to go over to this studio and do the same trailer because all the different companies were doing it.
Right.
And then between everything else I had, I remember coming home the same thing. We're talking maybe one day. And I'm going, how did somebody like Ernie Anderson or Don LaFontaine do this?
I guess that's why they had drivers.
Right.
Like,
it was just,
it made sense. It made sense.
You hit that wall and figured you had to find something had to give. And so cut out the auditions for a while.
Right. And so finally about 90, maybe late 98 or early 99, we decided I wouldn't work before noon. I just had to have my mornings. I had to have some hour in the day where I knew I didn't have to, be rushing out at 8 o'clock in the morning. And so that was that. I stopped working mornings and stopped auditioning. And then in Kay, you asked what did you say? What gave?
What gave?
Yeah. Well, my marriage gave, and I can't attribute it entirely to the fact that I was working so much, but it certainly was a pressure and a stressor that I look back now on and I see, and that was really tough. And
it's funny because our industry expects us. I'm just voiceover industry, entertainment industry.
Yes, entertainment industry as a whole.
When you're on a roll, they expect you to burn the candle at both ends. Now, I have a very dear friend. He lives on the East Coast now. But he became executive producer on several sitcoms. And I talked to his wife. I see his wife at the preschool, drop off kids. And I'd say, well, how's Thom? And she goes, who? Because he was never around because they were up late there doing rewrites and stuff like that. And that affected their life too, because the devotion that is necessary in certain, when you're like mentioned it this morning on the promo panel about the golden handcuffs, it is what it is.
I feel like that was such an illustrative morning for me because I have, I often think about, the disparity between work for men and women. And, here I am sitting on this promo panel and I'm sort of like a one-off kind of promo person. I've never had a network, that kind of stuff. And I'm listening to these.
But your name is associated with promo.
Isn't it funny?
I'm saying when they talk about women that now we have
that do promo
on a regular basis, but in terms of, when you were with whoever, Atlas or SPV.
Being one of the promo gals.
Yes. Well, and that was when I was with Sandy.
Here we go. We have an entertainment show. It's coming up. We'd like to use a woman. Here we go.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that sort of struck me was, I'm really kind of, and this is just me personally, I'm really glad that I, that I kind of got to draw boundaries around my life, my home life, and that I got to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And there's this idea, there's this sort of rabid idea in acting that, you have to take everything, because, because we're so desperate for work all the time. Right?
And because it comes in fits and starts.
You
never know when it's going to come.
Exactly.
So you have to take it when it comes.
Yeah. So I think that, I just think it's a really important notion for people who've been in the business for a long time, for people who are new to it, that you get to draw your boundaries about your life. It's like you saying, I'm not going to go into work till noon. Right. Is a way of. I
never knew that, and that I'm saying bold, and I don't mean bold in a bad way. My hats off to you with what your schedule was like, because I can tell you that when you talk about it in terms of marriage, my wife will tell you today that she likes who I am today better than I was between 2005 and 2011.
Yeah.
Because CBS
because you're probably more sane.
Yeah, because you're owned. You're owned. Yeah.
10:30 till 3:30.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, okay,
yeah,
it is what we wanted, but I didn't respond real well to the stress. You know what I mean? I needed.
It's a lot of pressure.
Let me tell you something. When I look back on those days, those really were the salad days for me, and I there's a part of me that longs for them again because.
But as you now.
But yes, right. As me now.
Yes.
Although I don't know if I would remain me now if I were to get back to that kind of schedule. I don't know that I could have them both. But what I was going to say is I don't. It's not that I don't know. I'm sure that I wouldn't want to be that busy again. When I think about the toll it took, because it wasn't just my marriage. It was my own, relationship with myself. I didn't even know who I was. I was just so burnt out and really, about to hit the wall. I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown.
And you know what's funny? You were doing comedy.
I was doing comedy.
It's one thing to be with Ernie Anderson, who was one of the angriest people but Ernie could walk in and go, take out his aggression. But there's Townsend having to talk about friends and third rock from the sun and all that stuff.
In tears.
Oh, God.
Listen, there were plenty of times when that happened too.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
When I had to take a little bit of time off when I had my daughter, because I had about, 9 months or so of postpartum depression.
Yeah.
And so, but it was such a feeling of panic because I was in a pretty good place in my career, and
right. And you didn't want to...
it was sort of like, what do I do? I don't know what to do, but I can't leave the house because it kind of manifested as anxiety, and I had vertigo at the same time, and it was like, I can't get in a car, I can't take my kid. Like, what do I do?
And that was maybe 15 years ago, but it's amazing how now postpartum really people are starting to taking it seriously.
Yes, but I called Rita Venari and I said, Rita, I can't come in, and she was so great. She just said, we'll be here. We'll be here when you're ready, and I, at the time, I thought my career was over. But I look back on it now and I go, it was a blip. It was a blip. It was a moment in time where I needed to focus on this new thing, this new family thing, right, that I had. Right. But it's, we tend to think that the last job we had is the last job we'll ever have. And so it's a panic inducing thing to draw a boundary and to say, I'm not available. I'm not available.
I'm going to Alaska. I don't want to bring my rig with me or something like that, and see how that goes over like a lead balloon.
I know,
or
right?
like that.
Well, see, what I do is I use that line to get work.
Right, it happens, right?
You want to get busy? Tell your agent
you're out of town.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, that is so true. I had a writing class where we met every Wednesday, and it was a group of us who had been there for years. Every Wednesday, and the class was divided into quarters, so there would be 8 weeks for a quarter, and then we take a few weeks off and then come back. And every once in a while, somebody who was a regular there would not show up, like they would be gone. And the writing teacher, Jack Grapes, he used to say of those people who were not there that they had not left writing, that they hadn't just disappeared, but that they were out getting supplies. Getting supplies. Which was a really... I love that phrase, and I tell it to my coaching clients if they're having a kid and they're freaked out that they go, I don't have time to audition, and I always say, live your life, because the fact that you're experiencing this thing as a new mother or a new father, that only feeds who you are and your experience as a human being. And our job as actors, whether or not we're doing promos or whether we're doing commercials or whether we're doing games, we're here to illuminate the human condition. And so you have to go out and live life. You have to go get some supplies.
I had a journalism teacher say, why are you a journalism major in the first year at UCLA? And he goes, go be another major. Have something to write about.
Yeah, have something to write about. But if you want to do a commercial about diapers, it's like, what's that like to change a diaper? Yeah. It's like, now I can speak to it.
Yeah. And I remember having conversations with Paula Tiso, I'm never going to be a mom because I'm not going to have it. But then she crossed that, boundary.
Yeah.
But it's so much harder for women. I had a question for both of you. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Biggest voiceover influence.
Wow. I would say, does it have to be one?
No.
But I would say probably Danny Dark. Danny really was my idol. The last radio station that I worked at, and I was production director there. And so, I'd be getting all the national spots in, from the ad agencies and stuff, and the reels, and I'd be racking up the reels and listening to these guys, and I'd listen. Oh boy, would I listen.
I was a production director too, and like, what do you do, household finance or something like that? And I go, who is this voice like butter? Danny, yeah.
Oh, Danny? Yeah. Well, I mean, it was Anheuser-Busch. It was Chevrolet.
Yeah.
It was Keebler. Those were really the three big accounts.
Yeah.
Well, and then, of course, NBC for, so long. But Danny, I remember when I first was aware of his voice coming in on a reel for I think it was Anheuser-Busch or maybe Chevrolet. But I remember thinking to myself, man, what a voice, and who is this guy? And so I had to start asking around, and of course, it was long before the internet, so it was tough to, kind of find out. If nobody knew, they didn't know,
Yeah.
So when I found out who he was, then I had a name to connect with this marvelous voice, and I would listen for him. And every time a Danny Dark spot would come in, I'd sort of make a proclamation. It's like, well, we got another Danny spot.
Yeah.
It was like he was my buddy, So did I mention this this morning?
And there you were working, well, not with each other, but you doing your stuff and he doing his stuff for how many years together over at NBC? So
but before that, Tommy, I got to tell you, when I first came to town, I was there less than a year when I got my first spot doing some Keebler elves.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. And I was over at LA Studios, and I'll never forget the day. I mean, I remember the studio. It was the studio back that you go through the little kitchenette there.
Yes, in the back. Yeah.
That one in the back. And I remember being back there on my first Keebler spot and looking at the copy and realizing that, and this was back in the days when, well, maybe they're still doing it on some big accounts, where they put the announcer's name. It doesn't just say announcer.
Well, if he had it for that long,
But he had Keebler for a long time. So it said Danny, on there. And I thought, oh, that's Danny. And I thought, I wonder if he's going to be coming in while we're still here, or whether we do our thing, then we leave, later, and then he comes in later or something. So we were wrapping up and finishing signing our contracts, and I thought, well, you're not going to get a chance to see him. And then all of a sudden the door opens up. The engineer says, hey, Danny, come on in. We're just wrapping up. And I'm like, that's it. And so I thought, I've got to so I said, Danny, my name is Townsend Coleman. I haven't been here very long, but I was on the radio back in Cleveland for quite a few years, and I'm a big fan of your work. And so it's a real privilege and a pleasure to meet you. Mm-hmm. And he was so gracious, And he was on the radio in Cleveland at one point.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well,
there you go.
So
right?
the planets aligning. Not only did you like his work, but it was the Cleveland roots.
Yeah. So Danny was he was an amazing guy. So when I got that audition I was talking about this morning over at NBC, mm-hmm, and the day that I went over there to do that, what ended up being the first must-see TV spot, Danny at the time had been the voice of NBC for maybe about a decade or so. And of course I was well aware of that, and his voice was just so burned into my psyche and my brain that when I went over there and went down to PPS2, the post-production studio for the promos, I looked at the setup over in the corner because they didn't have a booth. Did you ever announce down at NBC?
Yes, I did, but not very often. It was before you had that.
Yeah, but they didn't have a booth.
Right.
So, which was unusual to me because I'd never been down there, so I didn't know what it looked like. And everywhere else I worked was studios that always had booths,
Yeah.
So I looked around and I'm like, where's the booth? And I realized, oh my gosh, it's that chair right over there in the corner at the end of the counter.
Yeah.
So
like ABC.
Right.
Which to me was a little intimidating. You'd have the engineer and this and the producer and then Ernie Anderson at the end doing his crossword puzzles.
Right.
Get out of here.
Right. That's the way it was with Don LaFontaine down at NBC. He'd be sitting over there, waiting for you to finish up. And I'd go, boy, I know he's in a hurry because he's got Clinton on the clock out in the parking lot. Anyway, so I walked in and sat down in the chair, and my thought as I was sitting down was, I am sitting down in Danny Dark's chair. I am putting Danny Dark's headphones on. I am about to talk into Danny's mic, and I'm looking at Danny's monitor with Danny's volume. I mean, it's all Danny everything. It was as if in my mind, Danny had designed all that and owned all that.
Yeah.
That's a good memory.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. And it was hard when they first started using me, for me to get his voice out of my head. I found his voice coming out of my voice unintentionally. And if I listen to some of those very early promos, like from that first month or two, I can hear it. I can hear
but
that's me doing.
But you're a character actor. I mean, it's like you've been doing plays now it seems like every time I see you on Facebook, you're doing another play. So, Danny, no flap on Danny, but you were beyond radio. I mean, and which is probably why you've had such great success with characters, because you can gravitate, toward that.
Well, it took me forever to get his voice out of my head, and to try and find. It's like, dude, what would you do if you were doing this? Don't do Danny. I'm not trying to do Danny. It's just I can't not hear that.
But then you did. I mean, then it was like.
Then it was yours.
Eventually,
It was yours.
Eventually,
it became yours for sure.
And I want to know who for you.
Well, I came into voiceover not knowing anything about voiceover. It wasn't.
Singer that you were, artist that you were. You were a musician.
Well, I was not a musician. No, I was a singer.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a singer. But I left acting school, and it was sort of like, oh, I could do a voiceover. I had growing up in Santa Barbara, I was a jingle singer there, and so I sang jingles, and I worked for songwriters in Santa Barbara, and I remember doing a jingle for a restaurant that is now gone, and that was in Goleta, called Bray's. Do you guys remember Bray's family restaurant?
I've driven through Goleta, but maybe that was a long time.
It's gone. It's so gone. But so I sang this jingle, and there was a little voiceover in it, and they said, would you mind just reading it? And I said, sure, fun. So I read it, and that's I think I was still in high school. And then when I moved to Los Angeles, and when I left college, and then I saw this advertisement for a voiceover workshop at Dvorak Gillen. Do you remember that casting house?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and they were an on-camera casting place.
Mostly, yeah.
And so I went to this casting place, and Donna Ross was
the red. Yes, Donna Ross.
Yes, Donna Ross.
She worked at SBV for a while, and then she went into her own.
She did casting, yeah. And so she took that, reel to reel home, and she called me the following Monday and said, you would be good at this, and you should take a reel class with Thom Pinto. And so that's how I found you, through Donna Ross at that. And I remember when you were teaching, and I can't remember how many people were in that class, 4 or 6, it wasn't a huge class, but we got a lot of time on the, exactly. So we were just kind of lined up against that wall in the main studio,
That's right.
And you made reference to 2 women in particular, Diane Pershing and Lynette Meddy. And so, I ended up at SBV, where Diane Pershing was, still is. And I never met Lynette, who was at ICM. But Lynette was a goddess to me. But it's not like I sort of heard voiceover and thought, oh, who is that woman doing? There just weren't that many. I mean, and I also just I wasn't aware of voiceover. I was an actor, and I didn't think about
But you did
microphone.
But those 2 at least were a frame of reference for you.
Yes, that they really helped me sort of figure out what do women in voiceover do. So I listened to their stuff, and I was mindful of what they were doing, working.
Now,
and
Lynette
then
was with
ICM.
It was ICM at the time.
ICM at the time. I want to say too. Oh, what was it? Dang it! What was I going to say?
Not being aware.
I can't remember. What was it? I lost it.
Okay.
I lost it. But that's what happens when you're in your mid-50s.
I probably gave you Diane because I was always impressed. I mean, seriously, I remember working in radio in Palm Springs and hearing this woman doing JCPenney radio commercials.
Yeah.
That is the best retail I have ever heard, male or female.
She's like butter.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
Truly. I remember now.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! It just left me again.
Here we go.
Oh my gosh!
Give me a second and a half. And I'll forget
I know.
it.
As soon as you start talking, I'll remember.
That's
okay. Oh! I got it. When you mentioned this morning about Burt, Bars, and Kirby, this was more of this was way more of an influence on me when I was in high school, because Burt, Bars, and Kirby, I don't know who the actors were, but they had a stable of comedic actors. And MTD, Metropolitan Transit District in Santa Barbara, hired Burt, Bars, and Kirby, right, to do their radio stuff. And it was the most hilarious stuff I had ever heard. And I could tell a very distinct difference between these spots for MTD and all the other local radio crap, right? It was just not good stuff. And then, what is this comedy gold? Like, who are these people?
Well, Barsman wrote for Stan Freberg.
Oh my God!
He wasn't just a funny guy, just a regular funny guy. I mean, he had written legitimate stuff and then started. Crafting.
Right. And Bert, of course, when he and Dick were
with
together.
Dick and Bert together,
and it might have been them. It might have been
Dick and Bert.
Dick
That was
also,
that was a whole different animal.
That was in terms of comedy. I think I never laughed as hard when I first heard the two of them.
Yes,
together.
I feel like it was them.
Absolutely.
But I think with Bert, Bars, and Kirby, what I loved about vocally was you had, hello, I'm Alan Barsman. So he was there.
Yes, yeah, right.
And then, hello, I'm Jim Kirby. I'm the annoying character. And then Bert was kind of the guy in the middle. So they really kind of knew
I loved them.
The roles,
loved them.
The magic of a trio, And
well,
I love that
the first
you can do
time,
all three of those.
I know, that's so crazy.
I do all the people that I can't make money doing. Right?
So funny. Well, the whole story about how I managed to get into audition at Burt Burtis when Jeff Howell was casting there.
God bless Jeff.
Is like it's such a great story. I had moved from Sandy Schnarr Talent over to SBV.
Right.
And at the time, it's very different now, but at the time, Jeff was not seeing anyone at Sandy Schnarr Talent. He had his favorites at SBV, ICM, and CED. And was like, that's who I'm seeing. Mm-hmm. And so I move over to SBV, and Charles Massey,
God, I love
Charles. I know, I miss him terribly. He would every time Jeff would call and say, I want these 5 women. Charles would say, and what time for K-Bess? and Jeff Howell would say, I'm not seeing K-Bess, right? And it became this like thing between them. Every time Jeff would call, I want to see this person. And what time for K-Bess? And it got to be where when Jeff would call for men, Charles would say, and what time for K-Bess? And finally, Jeff just said, okay, I will see her. And so once I started auditioning there, I started booking stuff there. And so sort of the big pinnacle to me that was like, where am I? I was hired to do the legal, the disclaimer legal stuff for a series of radio spots for Ryder Truck. And so it was like funny. There were 2 comedic actors doing the body of the spot. And then I had to do this, super fast stuff. And Bert was directing the session, and I was terrified. So after years, I was a stutterer as a kid, right? And I felt this, I felt the stutter rise in my throat. And I was like, my life is on the line. Like if I don't get this out, it's over. It's over for me. Bert Burtis is directing me. I'm like,
and doing disclaimer.
And I'm doing a disclaimer.
Right.
And so I feel like angels were around me, but I just kind of, and he said to me, it's 10 seconds, but there's a lot of copy there. So, don't worry if you're a little bit over. Right. And I said, okay.
Thank you.
So I just kind of go, and it just came out of my mouth. First take. And he goes, 9.8, not bad. And I was like, okay, I lived, I can breathe. And I didn't stutter, but it was a moment I will never forget. Yeah, and it harkened back to my driving in my little Datsun, on State Street in Santa Barbara, listening to those ridiculously funny commercials, and I was there doing one. I was a straight guy, but I was, I was in it. But
that's like I remember the first time I did a spot with Dick Orkin, and it was the same thing. So
Chicken Man, because you grew up,
Chicken Man, yeah. But I remember just playing their spots, Dick and Bert's spots on the radio station that I was producing, and just being so taken by them, like you were, just like, who are these guys? They're hilarious.
Yeah.
You know,
They were
it was like
both-
Dick and
both-
Bert. It was just from Dick and Bert.
I think, you're talking about radio comedy, but I'm just saying that Orkin was like, Orkin would be like, if you're doing the spot and then suddenly you had a little thing where you say, oh, or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And he would say, you can say the oh.
Yeah.
He goes, it's there for a reason, type of thing.
Yeah.
Like, I was trying to make sure I wasn't stepping over his thing. And he just said to me, I'm just going to blow right past you. I'm going to be oblivious of you. So you can do your oh, please, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And as soon as he kind of did it like that, I went,
Ridiculous timing.
I got it. And all I did was just try to get in a word edgewise.
Right.
And
he-
it was, and I something
and
I
that's
never
what made it
forgot.
funny.
But it was his brilliance
Right.
of understanding that. But they, and Jeff, though, and I didn't want to embarrass him, but God, he eventually, I'm so glad he brought you in, because he used to just let you do what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Jeff, you come in and he'd give you some direction, but he would say, I brought you in because I thought you would be right for this, and I'm just going to leave it be. And you go from there.
Well, mine was for sure a sort of a test, like, okay, Charles, she better be worth the time, and so I was, pleased to be able to book a few things.
There are some people that are like that want to put the hammer down, but
that's what made going there so fabulous. It was like, oh, I'm working with Jeff Howell, and I'm at Waves, and it was I felt like I had arrived. Like I was really
Alan Barsman was at this particular section. He was the straight man, and Pat McCormick. Remember Pat McCormick?
Yeah.
So they were doing their thing, and all I was going to do was the announcer tag. So they had to work on their thing first, so you could figure. Barsman go, we'll let you know how much time you have. On that. Okay, great. So and I'm sitting there, and then
Dude, I swear.
I know.
The creative director is like, he's agonizing, he's pacing, and it was Cliff Einstein from Daly and Associates. And he's pacing, he's going back and forth, and Barsman, who doesn't know me very well, leans over, he goes, do you know who that is? I said, well, that's the creative director. He goes, that's Albert Brooks's brother. I said, what? He goes, yeah. Can you imagine? Albert Brooks grew up and his name was Albert Einstein. And then all of a sudden I started looking at this guy, and it was Albert's older brother, but he had so much of his same mannerisms.
Right.
Oh my God.
So Bart, that's when Bart says, we're going to be a while.
Okay, I have to ask you a couple questions on my B-Hive,
On your B-Hive list?
on my B-Hive list.
Okay.
Because, we love to reminisce about, all the fabulous times. But I want to know if you can describe your worst voiceover session, like one where you were like, oh, this just dropped right in the tank. Like it was an awful experience. Have you ever had one of those?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think how far back I have to go for it. No. I mean, in terms of, and there might be something more recent. Actually, it was a comedy promo for an ill-fated show on, I think it was called the WB then, not the CW.
Right.
And it was with Tom Cavanaugh and Eric McCormick from Will and Grace.
Oh, yeah, okay.
McCormack, thank you.
Really?
And
wow. What do I know?
It was just one of those things where he had booked me from my demo, and I just couldn't get it the way he wanted. And it was promo. We were doing a wild line. We weren't even working a track. But 3 in a row, no, that's not it. 3 in a row, no, that's not it. It was just like
brutal.
But that was also a point. I'm just going to say, not to go into my laundry list of stuff. That was also the point where I was kind of saying, comedy promo was going in another direction. It was going, I'm sorry to be differential, but it was, Townsend really broke the mold, and it needed to be more character. When I did more comedy, it was because I was a younger Mark Elliott, and I loved Mark Elliott. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But, the demand, it was just a nice, bright, easy smile, crisp, clean, blah, blah, blah. I
Disney.
didn't have to be funny. I just had to sound positive about the funny.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that was like, oh God.
Ouch. Yeah.
It was an ouchie.
Yeah. Townsend?
Yeah, I would say I had as it turns out, what was probably one of my most interesting sessions turned out to be one of my most brutal by extension, because what happened was I was booked it was a very interesting job, because it was for the voice of a pilot, airline pilot,
Okay.
For Vitamin Water. And this was a couple of years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. But what they needed me to do, because of the setup, I'll try and keep this short here. Because of the setup, they needed me actually in uniform on the plane.
Oh, wow.
Because the setup was that they were having a contest. This is for voiceover, but I'll explain it. Yeah. So they were having a contest where people were being flown on Southwest Airlines to Las Vegas to see this famous rapper in concert there. And they had to show up at Burbank Airport and get on this Southwest plane. And they were all being flown off to Vegas. Well, what they didn't realize was that the plane was never actually going to go anywhere. And what was going to happen was the plane was already outfitted with hidden cameras and disco lights and everything, but I mean, truly hidden. You couldn't see any of this, but multiple cameras all over the plane.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really crazy. And where I come in is I'm the pilot who gets on the PA and says to the people, ladies and gentlemen, it's your captain speaking. We're having a few technical difficulties. We're going to be a few minutes longer. Just sit tight and we'll be getting rolling shortly. And that goes on for like an hour.
Oh.
And they start getting like
mad.
Pissed off
Yeah.
and mad. And then my final line is, because I keep doing sort of variations of the same thing until the last time when I say, folks, this is Captain speaking, and, apologize once again, but looks like we're going to have to power down the airplane. There have been some electrical issues that we know we can square away, but
sounds like a nightmare.
We'll be if you just hang tight, we'll be right back with you. And so then the lights go dark. The whole plane goes dark. And then all of a sudden the disco lights come on and the music cranks up and they're in a disco now. And everybody's like looking around going, what in the world?
I do vaguely recall this from a few years ago. So the campaign did air.
It aired.
But what happened? Were they beating you up?
So then, as soon as that happens, a cart comes out from the galley that is actually a DJ cart, and the rapper is the DJ. The rapper they think they're going to Vegas to see is actually on the plane with them.
Oh.
And they freak out, and it's sort of...
Wow.
So that was my
setup.
part in this, and I had to be in the pilot seat of that plane as they got on the plane, so I had to be in uniform.
Yes.
Because they would be seeing me there, right? So I had to play the part. So that was the cool, interesting part of this spot.
Yeah, it doesn't sound bad so far yet.
Yeah.
I was just waiting for all the passengers to turn on you.
Yeah. No, and so and we did two flights. Okay, so we did the first one, and then they had another one like 2 hours later, where a whole new group of people thought they were going to Vegas. So we did it twice, right? So that was that. That was an all-day shoot one day, and with a rehearsal the day before and a costume fitting. I mean, this is all for a voiceover job where my line, I maybe had 6 words. Okay, ultimately that they were going to end up using, right? And I knew that. It's just budgets. I didn't know what.
Wow. So
we do this thing, and then like a week later, I get a call from the agency saying, the Vitamin Water spot you did, well, they need you to loop the lines. So I'm like, okay. And I couldn't believe that they didn't get something of what we recorded that they could use for the spot.
You've been doing this long enough to where, yeah.
But they didn't. And here's where it went south real fast. Because it was a producer who you know how when they don't know what they're looking for, they keep you guessing and trying a million different things in a million different ways? Well, there's only so many ways you can say 6 words. And it didn't change. And I'm telling you guys, we were on the line. At least I was doing it from my house, and I didn't go down to Santa Monica where they were. But I'm doing it at ISDN, and we were on the line almost an hour and a half.
Oh my God.
An hour and a half doing this. I must have done 150 takes of this.
You're right. There is only so many ways you can say 6 words. And the more you keep going,
the worse it gets.
It becomes meaningless.
It's oh my gosh. It's one of those things where I wish that I had recorded that whole session. On their side and my side, and just played it for a VO class and say, you guys think it can't get this bad? I'm going to play you something, and you're going to be squirming and begging me to turn it off in 5 minutes. And I'm telling you, it went off for an hour and a half.
Wow. That sucks.
It was, and by the way, for a voiceover gig.
For a voiceover
I have a costume video for a voiceover gig.
So the brilliance of that is that the day we were actually shooting, and it was on camera, not even on camera, but I was there on the set and stuff. That was the good part. The actual voiceover part.
The bad part.
That was this many words. It's like, man, that was brutal.
Well, you guys, we're coming to the end.
We're not done. We can't
I know.
be done.
No, we're almost there. But, I have a little tradition here.
But do we have to sing a round of Row, Row, Row Your Boat?
No, there's no singing. There's no singing. But I customarily play B-Hive roulette, right? Well, I don't have my roulette wheel. I'm not going to give you each 10 questions. We'd be here forever. So I'm just going to ask you, you guys are going to pick a number between 1 and 50. All right. And then I'm going to ask you the corresponding question. So just one. It's like a little,
1 through 50.
An amuse-bouche of voiceover. It's okay. Right. Don't worry. And then I'll have one more question for each of you. Okay. So who wants to go first? Pick a number between 1 and 50.
I want you to go first.
I'm going to go with 13.
13. How many push-ups can you do?
Now, seriously, maybe 10.
Okay.
Show us.
That's.
So I believe you. I believe you. I believe everyone.
Notice Townsend.
Who answers the question?
Maybe
10.
Covering my bases.
Okay, Townsend. You
47.
47. What's the furthest you've been from home?
Well, I would guess it would be Switzerland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Switzerland.
Switzerland, ja.
Switzerland, ja. You speak German und
die Jungen,
und French und
ab Interlaken, Grillwald, Bern.
Yeah, I don't know what you're saying. Okay, now last question.
Lauterbrunnen.
For each of you, I can speak a little German to you. I can say.
I can't speak. Those are just names of little towns.
Hast du gut geschlafen?
Yes, I know. Me too.
Yeah. Hast du schön geträumt?
No. Ja, will gerne haben.
That's my favorite flavor. Sorry.
Is it?
It is.
Do you know what I said?
I have no idea what you said.
Hast du gut geschlafen? Did you have good sleep?
Oh.
Hast du schön geträumt? Did you have good dreams?
Oh.
There you go. Yeah, good dreams. Okay, so last question, and then we're wrapping this thing up.
All right.
Each of you, just take your turn. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say to you when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Your turn first.
Well done, thou good and faithful servant.
Right on.
That's good. That's really good. And that's the same question.
Same question, yeah.
God, I'm sorry. I'm thinking about my father, my sister.
Wow.
They're in the next room. Join them. I just want to be welcome.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Because it does exist.
You guys are awesome.
That's
Thank you so much. Can I tell you something funny?
Yes, please. Sorry,
Please now.
I didn't want to get all Italian and wistful.
I love that. I love it.
I love that.
So, I had a guest on Nicole Balick. You know Nicole?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's
So
in
Nicole,
Hawaii
she moved to
again.
Hawaii. Yeah. So I asked her this question: If heaven exists, what do you want to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates? And she said, "I want God to say, 'Come on in. I need somebody to do my on hold message.'" The best voiceover answer. So thank you for joining me in the B-Hive. You all watching here, take a look.
Right.
This is the last time you'll see men on the program because you can't top this.
First and last time.
First and last,
Yay.
yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, darling. All right, you guys.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining me today in the B-Hive. For podcast notes, pictures, and more information on my guests, visit the podcast website, thebhivepodcast.com. Find me at my website, kbest.com. Follow me on Twitter at kbest, and subscribe to my channel on YouTube. If you've a mind to, please post a review of the podcast on iTunes. Kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul and good for the bones. Come back for more Women in Voiceover next time in the B-Hive.